So here are some signs that your oil is contaminated, and there's a few things you can look out for without even looking at the oil or inspecting the oil. Just looking at the way your car is working, how the engine is running, they can all give you an indication of the oil quality. So manufacturers state oil change frequencies in terms of months or miles driven generally, but in reality it's often very different for different drivers. You see, different drivers have different driving styles. Some use the engine when it's predominantly cold and do lots of short journeys. Others use the engine very hot. So they do lots of very long journeys and use those upper ends of the RPM range. And both of those different driving styles have very different effects on the condition of your oil. And obviously, if your oil condition degrades, you're going to have problems with reliability because it's going to exacerbate the wear and tear on the engine. Some things you need to look out for that can just indicate that your engine oil has degraded. Really, it's things that you can do from the driver's seat as you're driving the car, as well as a few inspections on the oil itself. So first up, we're just going to talk about the noises you get from the engine as you drive. So if the engine oil is degraded, it's going to start to lubricate less effectively. You're going to increase the friction inside the engine. That extra wear and tear and friction is going to change the noise the engine makes. So it will typically be louder. If it's been able to deteriorate over a period of time, you may experience some fairly severe knocking as significant components within the engine have worn. So another thing to look out for is overheating on the engine. So the increased friction inside the engine can cause the engine to run much hotter than it was originally intended. Or perhaps the car is struggling to maintain the temperature. You're seeing it oscillate between the normal operating temperature and slightly above that, and then back to the normal operating temperature. So any kind of indication that the car is running hotter than it was originally doing can indicate there is a problem with the engine oil, particularly the lubrication you're getting from it. So that might be time to do an oil change. Another thing that you might notice is the smell of oil inside the car. So if you can smell oil inside the car, that's not normal. The oil is inside the engine. It needs to be contained within the engine. If that's escaping somehow, you have a problem. So it could be down to an oil leak. It may be starting to burn oil, which is a serious problem, or it may just be that the engine is running hotter. It's overheating the oil. If you've got a turbo engine as well, they can add a lot more heat to the oil. So this increased temperature really makes the oil much thinner. It runs more easily. It's more likely to leak. So they can all be indications that the oil quality has degraded. The car may also be returning less fuel economy than it originally was. Again, that's down to the increased friction inside the engine. All of the components in the engine are working harder to move, and in overcoming that friction, you're effectively losing power. So some of the fuel is going to overcoming the friction, creating more heat within the engine, and that is going to further increase the friction inside the engine. So you've got a runaway situation that's just going to get worse there. So if you notice a drop in fuel economy and there's no other indications, it could just be time to do an oil change. So now we come to actually looking at the oil. So just through the dipstick, if you put the dipstick in and you pull it out, you can get an idea of how dirty the oil is. So when you first put the oil in, it's translucent. It's a browny green color in most cases. So some people might even describe that as an amber color. I'm personally colorblind, so don't take too much attention to what I say about the color of engine oil. But it's clear. As it degrades, it goes to black. So when you are due to do a service on a car, particularly if it's a diesel car with a diesel particulate filter on it, the engine oil will go very, very dark in color. So just looking at the color of the oil can give you an indication of how far through its service life you are. So another color to look out for in the oil is a sort of creamy, milky appearance. It's often been described as a mayonnaise, and that can indicate that coolant is getting in. That might be the sign of a faulty head gasket, or it may just be caused by condensation inside the engine has built up to such a point that the oil has started to pick up a lot of water, and that creates this milky texture on the oil. So if it's not translucent, it's not black, but it's starting to go cloudy or milky, that can indicate there is impurities in the oil. Now, you really can't beat sending your oil off for analysis at at a lab. You only need to do it a few times. You'll build up a picture of your driving style, your specific engine, and how often you need to change it. The oil analysis lab will generally give you recommendations on how much service life your oil has left, or recommendations on how frequently you should be changing the oil. So the manufacturers set these arbitrary months and miles based on really keeping the costs down. They don't want people to have to spend too much money on servicing, otherwise they wouldn't sell their cars. But in some cases you need to drastically reduce those to ensure longevity of your car. But if you're not planning to keep your car for a long time, there's probably no point even worrying about this. Dirty engine oil can also clog the filter, and a clogged filter is really restricting the flow of oil through the engine. So the oil pump is going to struggle to flow the engine oil around the engine and provide the lubrication. So as the engine oil degrades, it clogs the filter, it further reduces the flow around the engine, it increases the heat, the oil starts taking a hit. So once again, we're in this runaway situation where things are just going to deteriorate and get worse for you. You can actually also now get test strips that you just dip into the oil, and they can tell you if the engine oil contains fuel, if it contains water or moisture has built up, and in some cases these test kits can even tell you if there are metal particles inside the oil. So it's certainly a good idea to have these on hand to give you a quick check or a quick opportunity to look at the condition of your oil, but you really can't beat sending it off for those professional lab analysis. So other things to look out for: you may get a check engine light coming up on the dashboard, so that can indicate that the oil pressure is too low. That can often be down to the quality of the oil. It's not flowing correctly, it's not lubricating the engine properly, or maybe it's just got too hot. If the check engine light has come on, that's a sign you've got a serious problem that you really do need to address. So don't delay, get the car serviced and address whatever it was that was causing that check engine light to come on. That may also on some cars throw an oil check light if the oil pressure is abnormally low, or the car itself detects there is some problem with the oil or the circulation or the lubrication. It can fire up that little warning light on the dashboard. Often though, it's just a case of having too little oil in there, so you certainly need to top that up. But that's not always a sign of contamination, it's just a sign that the oil level has dropped, and you certainly want to investigate as to why the oil level has drop. You may also get exhaust smoke coming. So if the engine is burning oil, that's a bad sign. That can be caused through the wear and tear that has happened through the degradation of the oil. So that's often too far gone for a service or an oil change to fix. If the smoke coming from the exhaust is black or blue, or it's starting to get dark, that's certainly something you should investigate. And often doing a full service on the car, changing the oil and the other service components, can go some way to addressing that problem. You really want to keep your engine running as effectively and efficiently as possible. So I hope this video has been useful to you. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. We'd love you to stay tuned to the channel. We've got this video lined up that you should find interesting, and please could you boot that like button, because that really does help us to get out there. Thanks for watching. See you in this next video.